I woke up to the ICU monitor chirping, a steady, annoying beat like a cheap metronome. Then I heard my son's voice in the hall. He was asking a nurse how fast paperwork could be signed if things went south. Hearing that kind of sentence turns your heartbeat into a hammer pounding against your ribs. I was still lying there, hooked up to all those machines, when I found out my children were throwing a party to split my $5 million estate. They were popping confetti for a man they didn't even expect to make it to Wednesday. Can you even imagine? Before we get into what happened next, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. You won't believe how this story ends. Chicago in February, knives the lungs. It was Tuesday, Feb 12. The whiteboard over my bed read HR 62, SPO2 98%, and under goals, someone had written rest. I uncapped the dry erase marker and wrote two names instead, Val and Patel. Val was the night nurse with a cop's memory. Patel was the estate lawyer who drafted the trust Ellen and I built the summer before she died. The curtain sighed, and Bree came in with a too bright smile and a planner that said, "Spring reset, like grief, could be crossed off a list." She asked if the house plants needed watering. She didn't mention the stainless champagne bucket I'd later see reflected in a photo. The cardiologist called my 3 stents textbook, which is surgeon speak for "you're alive, don't get clever." On Wednesday, I heard a question float from the family lounge. Does DPOA beat a will if he... Val's shoes squeaked once, sound of a line being drawn. She adjusted my fluids and said quietly, "For what it's worth, I make notes." My phone buzzed on the tray. A neighborhood app flagged a delivery to my address on Saturday, Feb 17. Balloon arch. Congrats. Gold and white. Then a text from my cousin's kid, Bree's story, blurred charcuterie on my walnut table with the caption, "To new chapter." I'd refinished that table after Ellen's funeral, each pass of the sander a prayer. I tasted metal, not blood, panic cooling into resolve. I opened notes and hit record. "Northwestern Memorial ICU, Tuesday after surgery," I said. Evan asked about signatures. Bree posted a board. Evidence, not emotions. I scrolled to our family thread, back to Jan 30, where Evan typed "dibs on the lake cabin," like legacy was a coat rack. Screenshot, saved to a folder I named Party. The name felt obscene and perfectly accurate. Val checked my lines and glanced at the door. "Your son asked about signatures again," she said, as if commenting on whether visitor log will have times. A gift hidden inside a sentence. Outside, an ambulance sighed down Erie Street, Doppler rising and falling like a warning that had finally found its address. By Thursday, I could sit up. I rehearsed sentences the way I used to brief city inspectors. Feb 17 florist 186, Feb 17 caterer 1846, Feb 18 bank inquiry at Lakeview Credit Union. Facts cooled the fever. The estate wasn't just numbers, the paid-off brick 2-flat Ellen. And I scraped for the $280K cabin where she taught the kids to bait hooks, the brokerage I built a check at a time. My children had mistaken a pause in my life for its ending, access for ownership, tick, tick, tock. I pressed the call button. "Val, I'll need a pen, my discharge orders, and 5 quiet minutes to phone Attorney Patel." If my kids wanted a new chapter, fine, I would write it. Footnotes, exhibits, and all. The morning they called it a celebration of life, I was still tethered to hospital monitors. Saturday, Feb 17. The nurse drew my blood at 6:10 a.m. By noon, the Thai neighbor texted a photo of valet signs at my driveway. The caption read, "Hope you're okay, Marty. Looks like they're filming something." Filming, not grieving. I stared at the message until my vision swam. Then another notification, 180 Sidlar florist charge, description line reading, "Split party, pallet." The word party hit like another defibrillator shock. I pictured my dining room, the walnut table Ellen and I rescued from a demolition sale, glittering under my daughter's ring light, champagne sweating onto the wood I'd oiled with my own hands. Bree posted a story an hour later. I saw it. Between doses of beta blocker, blurred charcuterie board, laughter frozen mid-frame, captioned new chapter. My ribs tightened against the dressing. Every beep of the monitor became applause for their audacity, Nurse Val noticed. She adjusted the IV and whispered, "You want to live long enough to watch them regret it." That sentence steadied me more than morphine. By Sunday, I'd convinced myself maybe it was a misunderstanding. Families panic around hospitals. Maybe they just didn't think. Then my accountant, Michael Rao, walked in with his laptop and a face like a man coming to read bad weather. "Marty," he said, "2 new charges on your Amex. $1,846 for catering, $4,200 to studio glam lighting. You sign these?" I shook my head. The oxygen cannula hissed, louder now. Rao opened his yellow pad and drew 3 arrows. Trust, assets, controls. You set a no-contest clause, remember? And a springing DPOA. If they moved early, they're exposed. His voice had that even contractor tone we both used to calm subcontractors before a lawsuit. For a few seconds, shame outmuscled anger. What kind of father raises children who'd toast his exit while the IV still dripped? I thought of Ellen's handwriting in the trust binder, her E-loops like gentle hooks, and nearly tore out the IV line. Instead, I gripped the bed rail until my knuckles paled. Val returned with fresh linens. She looked at the laptop screen, saw the invoices, and murmured, "You'll need witnesses." Not pity, procedure. That's when the grief shifted. The weight moved from my chest to my spine, solidifying into something useful. When the doctor cleared me for limited calls, I dialed Aisha Patel. The line clicked twice, then her measured voice. "Martin, I heard you gave everyone a scare." "Not everyone," I said. "Some threw a party." Silence. Then, "Tell me the numbers." I read them off. $1,846, $4,200, Feb 17. She exhaled like a mechanic identifying a leak. "They don't understand the difference between expectation and entitlement," she said. "Let's teach them." That night, the monitor beeped slower. Outside my window, the city was snow-soft, indifferent. I could picture Bree's laughter, echoing through my house, Evan clinking glasses over the same mortgage deeds he never helped pay. My anger cooled into architecture. Rooms labeled evidence, motive, method. By Monday morning, I'd stopped checking their social media. Instead, I opened my notes and dictated a line I would later read aloud in court. They didn't steal my wealth. They tried to steal my role, the living author of this family. The machines around me hummed approval. Val smiled at the rhythm on the monitor. "Looks like your heart's back to normal," she said. "Not yet," I told her. "But my pulse has a purpose again." I closed my eyes and imagined my next step. Locks, logs, ledgers. Each beep in the ICU wasn't a warning anymore. It was a countdown. Discharge day came on a grey Monday, February 19th. The nurse said, "No stairs, no stress." I nodded and signed the papers, knowing both instructions would be broken before sunset. Outside, Chicago looked washed in aluminum light. Val hugged me goodbye and slipped a folded note into my palm, her personal email. "If you need a witness," she said softly, "I'm better at remembering than forgiving." At home, the silence felt wrong. There was a faint trace of rosemary and wine in the air. Someone had cooked here. The houseplants were watered, yes, but the glasses in the sink still smelled of champagne. I sat in the sunroom, beside Ellen's old armchair, and opened a legal pad. Across the top, I wrote 3 words: locks, cameras, paper trail. I started. Small. The Ring doorbell app showed motion alerts between 6:12 p.m. and 11:48 p.m. on Feb 17. The thumbnail captured a reflection in the window, a gold congrats balloon arch. I stared at that image until my pulse found a rhythm that wasn't grief. By noon, I drove to the HOA office on Belmont. Mr. DeLuca, a retired cop with shoulders like a file cabinet, was behind the counter. "Heard you had some kind of event," he said, watching my face carefully. I told him there'd been a misunderstanding while I was hospitalized. He chuckled once, bitter. "Saw a white Sprinter van idling by your garage around 6:30 that night. Guy in a realtor coat told the florist to go around back so the neighbors wouldn't get the wrong idea." That line alone was worth more than an apology. I filled out a camera footage request form, DeLuca initialed it, and I left with a copy tucked in my coat. On the drive back, I called Attorney Patel. Her tone was all precision. "Martin, you're lucid, oriented, and fully capable. We'll need to document that. I'll prepare a trust restatement and a letter of wishes. Sign nothing until we meet on February 22nd. At home, I opened the trust binder Ellen and I built back in June 2018. The tabs still smelled faintly of her lavender lotion. Page after page of our handwriting, neat and hopeful. She'd written a line on the inside cover, "For fairness, not favor." I touched the ink with my thumb. That sentence would be my North Star. I set up a small recording station on the kitchen table, my phone, a notebook, and the florist invoice folded beside a mug of reheated coffee. The smell of reheated grounds mixed with the faint sweetness of the balloon residue still clinging to the curtains. Every object in that house had become evidence. That night, I replayed the ICU visitor log photo Val had sent me. 2 entries. Evan K., 7:14 p.m., Feb 16. Bree K., 7:58 p.m., Feb 16. No one after midnight, which meant they'd left the hospital and gone straight to my house for their little celebration. I underlined the times twice. Before bed, I drafted 3 file labels: party, bank, and forgiveness. I filled the first with screenshots, invoices, and DeLuca's form. The second would soon hold account statements and affidavits. The third stayed empty, a thin white folder that reminded me of boundaries I wasn't yet ready to cross. I sat in the dark for a long time, hearing the radiator click like the ICU monitor. The house had its own heartbeat again, slower, steadier. Tomorrow I'd change the locks. Tomorrow I'd stop being their victim and start being their witness. This locksmith arrived right on time. Tuesday, February 20th, 9 a.m. A young guy with steady hands and quiet respect, the kind that doesn't ask questions when you say, "Change every lock." I watched the brass cylinders fall into his tray. One by one, he offered to keep the old keys, just in case. I told him to melt them down for scrap. When he finished, I set the new code on the garage keypad to 9471, Ellen's birthday. It wasn't sentiment, it was a vow. That afternoon, I met Michael, Rao, at my kitchen table. He had his laptop open before I even sat down. "Something popped," he said, tapping the screen. "A Lakeview Credit Union inquiry logged on Feb 18, 10:26 a.m. The access request was marked authorized party." "That's your son, Marty. He must have tried to check your balances while you were still in ICU." The familiar furnace in my chest flared. I pulled my coat back on. "Let's go talk to them." At the bank, Marta, the teller, recognized me instantly. "You're Mr. Kellen, the contractor who built my cousin's deck." She frowned when I mentioned the inquiry. "Yes." A tall man, realtor badge. "Asked if your funds would auto-transfer to heirs if you didn't make it." She hesitated. "I thought it was weird, so I made a note." I asked for a printed record of that note. She printed it, signed, dated, and stapled it. 2/2025. Her pen left a deep groove through the paper, proof pressed in ink. Rouse slipped it into a file sleeve marked Bank. "You might need her affidavit later," he murmured. When I called Attorney Patel that evening, her voice sharpened. "Perfect timing. We'll draft a trust amendment tomorrow, move both properties." into a pour-over trust with a spendthrift clause. That means if they try this again, they get $1, not 1 cent more. She paused, then added, "We'll execute on Feb 22nd at 3:15 p.m. Bring witnesses, blue ink, and your driver's license. Let's make this airtight." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to calm. I spent the next morning gathering papers. Florist invoice, Dr. unravel 1872, catering bill 1346, the charcuterie receipt, and that blurred cut new chapter screenshot. I lined them on the table like tools. Hammer, wrench, chisel. A craftsman never builds. Without measuring twice. While sorting mail, I noticed an envelope half hidden behind Ellen's cookbook. Inside was a draft listing agreement, my name faintly traced in pencil at the bottom, my initials forged, then erased when it didn't pass inspection. Evan's arrogance always showed in the corners. He never knew how to finish clean. I photographed it against my granite counter beside the catering receipt, timestamp 2:48 p.m. The rosemary smell still lingered in the oven. I crouched, opened the door. A single dried sprig sat on the rack, forgotten. I turned the timer dial and let it ring once, sharp and empty. Ding! My pulse synced to it. 1 chime for every $1 they wouldn't see. That night, I went through the trust binder again, now updated with Patel's draft. The clause read clearly, "Any beneficiary who preempts distribution, manipulates the grantor's capacity, or exploits estate access shall receive $1 in full satisfaction of all claims." Simple, legal, final. The next day, Feb 22, I arrived at Patel's office downtown. The lobby smelled like toner and carpet cleaner. She greeted me with 2 witnesses, a notary and her paralegal. We signed the restatement and letter of wishes at 3:15 p.m. Blue ink, drying like fresh asphalt. I initialed each page slowly, making sure the pen pressed deep enough to leave an impression even through carbon copies. When we finished, Patel slid the documents into a binder. "You've just built a legal firewall, Martin. They can't touch you without burning themselves." Driving home along Lakeshore Drive, I watched the frozen water shimmer like metal. The city skyline looked exactly like a trust ledger, cold, sharp, unbending. Back home, I locked the new deadbolts and placed the blue ink originals inside my safe. Then I stared at the empty space where the old spare key used to hang, Evan's key. Gone. The house finally felt secure, but not silent. The wind through the vent made the same soft whoosh as the ICU oxygen line. Only this time, I was breathing on my own. The oven timer dinged again in my mind. Time's up for sentiment. Next phase, exposure, Friday, February 23rd. I was pouring coffee when the knock came. 3 sharp raps that always meant Evan. I let him stand in the cold long enough to see the new keypad light up red before I opened the door. "Just checking on you, Pops," he said, fake warmth curling his voice. Behind him, Bree shuffled in wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a scarf big enough to be a curtain. 2 guys followed with tripods. "My team," she announced. "We're filming content about recovery and family support." "Turn it off," I said flatly. Bree pouted. "It's just B-roll." "Then roll it somewhere else." Evan laughed. "Don't be dramatic. We're just trying to keep things organized. The properties need attention." He nodded toward the 2-flat deed framed on the wall. "We'll list by April. You can get yourself a nice condo with an elevator. Safer that way." That sentence, "you can get yourself a condo," lodged deep. It wasn't concern, it was control. I gestured to the dining table. 3 sheets of paper waited there like exhibits, the 1,346 catering bill, the 186 florist invoice, and a screenshot of Bree's new chapter post. No speeches, no anger, just evidence laid bare. Bree's eyes flicked over the amounts, and she gave a nervous laugh. Evan sneered. "You weren't using that money anyway." I pressed record on my phone in plain view. "Say that again," I said. He froze, then snorted. "Don't start playing lawyer, Dad." "Too late," I told him. Bree turned to the camera crew, whispering, "Cut for now," and they quietly packed up. Evan shoved his hands in his coat. "You changed the locks." I did. "Illegal, since it's mine," I interrupted. "Every nail, every beam, every mortgage payment since 1986. My voice came out steady, almost surgical. "You don't have access, not anymore." For a moment he just stared, calculating. Then he muttered, "We'll see about that," and slammed the door so hard the picture frames rattled. An hour later, Mr. DeLuca knocked. The retired cop held up a thumb drive. "Got your footage," he said. "HOA cameras caught the whole. Circus. Champagne boxes going in at 6:21 p.m. on the 17th, trash bags out at 11:37, even a catering van parked halfway on the lawn. Time-stamped." I plugged the drive into my laptop and watched. My house looked like a stranger's home. Music, lights, laughter leaking out of my windows. Bree twirling near the fireplace. Evan tapping on his phone. Guests raising glasses. I pressed pause. At the frame, showing the balloon arch reflected in my mirror, proof pixel by pixel. At 7:45 p.m., I called Michael Rao. "We're ready," I said. He texted back 10 minutes later, "Bank officer willing to testify. Patel drafting emergency motion." By morning, Attorney Patel had filed an ex parte petition, requesting an immediate freeze on all property titles pending a capacity hearing. The hearing date came back. March 3rd. I printed every file, labeled them by hand. 1, ICU, 2, party, 3, bank, 4, ring footage. I slid the stack into a binder that used to hold Ellen's recipes. I couldn't help smiling at that. Justice cooked low and slow. That evening, I made tea in the same kettle that had once whistled over our holiday dinners. It screamed now, high and sharp like a referee calling time. I poured the water, let the steam fog the window, and whispered to the reflection, "You wanted a new chapter? Here's your edit." As night fell, I double-checked the locks, then set the oven timer for 8 a.m., the start of the next battle. Each tick from that timer felt like the steady rhythm of something rebuilding itself inside me. Not my heart, but my resolve. The stage was ready. The evidence was set. Next stop, the courtroom. 2 mornings before the hearing, Saturday, March the 1st, I asked them both to meet me at Bella's on Clark, a narrow corner cafe with steamed windows and bad jazz. I told them it was to clear the air. They came, Evan in a navy coat with realtor swagger, Bree in influencer beige. The smell of burnt espresso hung between us. I kept my hands flat on the table so they could see I wasn't shaking. "I know what you did," I said quietly, sliding 2 sealed envelopes toward them. Evan eyed them. "What's this, some drama?" "Read it." Inside each envelope lay a copy of the trust restatement, the spendthrift clause, and my handwritten letter of wishes. The first line read, "If you profit from my suffering, you will not profit from my estate." Bree's lip trembled. Evan's face went red. He skimmed the line about a $1 bequest for exploiters and let out a small, incredulous laugh. "You think a judge will let you pull this after a heart attack? He'll read the date, Feb 22, 3:15 p.m., and he'll see 2 witnesses and a notary stamp." I offered them an out. "Sign a stipulation today, repay the $6,046 you charged to my accounts. Write an apology, I'll keep it private." Bree's hands fluttered like she wanted to say yes. Evan leaned forward, voice low. "You're not well, Dad. Everyone knows it. You should be resting, not writing threats." "Threats?" I said. "That's your word, not mine." He pushed back his chair, eyes narrowing. "You're not fit to manage 5 million. Bree, come on." But Bree didn't move. "I didn't mean for it to hurt him," she whispered. For half a second I saw my daughter, the little girl, who sat under my drafting table, tracing blueprints while I worked. Then Evan grabbed her arm and stormed out, leaving the door to slam hard enough to jingle every cup on the counter. I stayed long enough to pay the bill in cash. "Keep the change," I told the waitress. "Family discount." When I got home, I placed both unsigned stipulations in a manila folder labeled "Refused." I was sealing evidence, not emotion. That evening my phone buzzed. Attorney Patel. "We've got movement," she said. "Opposing counsel, someone your daughter's friendly with, just filed an emergency guardianship petition. They're alleging diminished capacity." I almost laughed. "They came for my house. Now they're claiming my mind." "Exactly," she said. "Judges hate opportunistic timing. Get your cardiologist to issue a capacity letter dated today. Keep it simple. Oriented, articulate, capable of managing affairs." I hung up and called Dr. Huang. She answered from her car. "You sound more lucid than half my colleagues," she said. "I'll fax Patel the letter tonight." The irony wasn't lost on me. The children who once fretted I'd overwork myself were now praying I looked incompetent. Every breath I took was another nail in the coffin of their case. That night, I sat at Ellen's desk and reread the letter of wishes. Beneath the main clause, I added one new line: "No revenge shall exceed the dignity of the truth." I folded the page carefully, sealed it, and slid it back into the binder. Outside, the snow had turned to freezing rain, tapping the window like a clock counting down. By midnight, my phone pinged, Patel confirming receipt of the doctor's note, capacity affirmed as of March 2nd. I exhaled, long and steady. They wanted a fragile old man. What they'd get instead was a witness with a pulse, a paper trail, and a judge who'd see exactly who had been celebrating whose death. Tomorrow, the Daily Center. Tomorrow, the gavel. Tomorrow, they'd find out the difference between inheritance and evidence. Monday, March 3rd, the Daily Center always smelled the same, like marble dust and cold coffee. I arrived early, binder under my arm, wearing my old grey suit. Not the expensive one, the one Ellen bought me for our first court permit. Meeting back in the 90s. I wanted the judge to see a builder, not a millionaire. In the corridor outside courtroom 1406, Evan whispered harshly to Bree, their lawyer hovering between them. Bree looked pale. Evan looked like he was about to list the building. I didn't nod or greet them. I just watched the reflection of the courthouse seal in the glass door and felt the weight of my trust binder against my chest. A blueprint for justice. When Judge Calder entered, his gavel tapped once. Case number 25, EG 1021, Kellen Guardianship Petition. Appearances: Patel rose, crisp and calm. Aisha Patel for Mr. Martin Kellen, respondent and trust grantor. Opposing counsel, a man in a slick suit with 2 white teeth, announced himself as provisional counsel for the concerned family members. Concerned. That word almost made me laugh. He started with his pitch. "Your Honor, this is a case of a frail gentleman recently discharged from ICU, potentially disoriented, managing complex assets alone. His adult children fear mismanagement and wish to protect his interests." Patel stood without looking at notes. "We intend to show that the only mismanagement came from the petitioners, who celebrated his supposed passing with catered food, charged to his Amex, and attempted premature access to trust assets while he lay in intensive care." The judge's brows rose slightly. "Go on. Exhibit A," Patel said, opening the binder and placing a flash drive on the table. HOA security footage. February 17th, 6:21 p.m. to 11:37 p.m., showing the petitioners hosting a party at Mr. Kellen's residence while he was hospitalized. The monitor flickered on. There they were, my own children laughing under a congrats. Balloon arch. Bree's champagne glass flashing in the light, Evan directing the florist around the back door. The courtroom stayed silent, except for the faint audio of corks popping. Patel continued. Exhibit B, florist invoice, 1/1/1872, addressed to the respondent's home. Note line, split party pallet. She slid the invoice forward, the 186-figure crisp in blue ink. Exhibit C, catering invoice 846, charged to respondents American Express on February 17th. Signature line, blank. The judge's expression didn't change, but his pen stopped moving. Then came Marta, the bank teller. She testified in plain, nervous English. The son came to the branch on February 18th, asked if accounts would automatically transfer if the client passed away. He said, quote, "He's not expected to make it. I thought it sounded wrong, so I wrote it down." Patel handed the note across. "Signed and dated the same day, Your Honor." The opposing counsel stammered, "Your Honor, grief causes confusion. Champagne isn't confusion," the judge interrupted dryly. Next came Nurse Val. Still in scrubs, she sat upright, hands folded. "I was on duty in ICU that week. Mr. Kellen's son asked me in the hallway who could sign estate documents if his father didn't make it through the night. I recorded that in my notes." The judge nodded slowly. "Admissible as recollection of event." Finally, Patel motioned to me, "Mr. Kellen, please take the stand." I rose, walked carefully to the witness box, and swore in. My palms were dry, first time that had ever happened in a courthouse. Patel stepped back, letting me speak. "I'm a retired contractor," I began. "I built my business nail by nail. My late wife and I spent 30 years saving for the 2-flat, the cabin, the retirement accounts. We set up a trust to protect that work, not to fund parties while I was on life support. My children aren't villains. They're impatient heirs who thought a pulse could be paused like a transaction." The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the hum of the overhead lights. I turned to Evan and Bree. "You could have waited to toast until I was cold." Patel handed me a paper. "Is this your signature?" "Yes," I said. "On the restatement executed February 22nd, 3:15 p.m., witnessed and notarized. And were you of sound mind at the time?" I smiled faintly. "Sound enough to change. The locks and record every word of this mess," she nodded. "No further questions." Opposing counsel stood, trying for sympathy. "Mr. Kellen, your children were distraught, maybe confused about your condition. Isn't it possible they meant no harm?" I looked straight at him. "Possible, sure, but not probable when they called the caterer and printed menus." A few. Chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge's mouth twitched. Patel closed the binder and spoke the line she'd been saving. "Vulnerability doesn't explain champagne on a hospital night." The judge leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Petition for guardianship denied. All property transfers frozen pending audit. Petitioners will appear within 10 days to show cause why their actions do not constitute financial exploitation." He glanced at me. "Mr. Kellen, your paperwork is impressive. You've clearly got your wits about you." Evan's jaw locked. Bree's mascara smudged as she stared at the screen, still paused on her own smiling face. Judge Calder tapped the gavel once. "Court is adjourned." The sound wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That single crack felt like oxygen. The marble. Floors seemed to vibrate under my shoes as I walked out. In the hallway, Patel exhaled for the first time all day. "Congratulations," she said softly. I shook my head. "Not yet. They'll come crawling back, but at least now they'll have to knock." Outside, the cold wind off the river cut through my coat, but it felt cleaner than hospital air. I loosened my tie, stepped into the streetlight, and whispered to myself, "I built houses for a living. Today I rebuilt a boundary." The gavel still echoed behind me, fading slow and certain, like the last beep of a heart monitor finally, declaring the patient stable. The snow was melting by the time March 7th arrived, leaving slush in the gutters and clarity in my chest. After the hearing, the court issued the freeze order. No sale, no transfer, no creative reallocation of funds. Every account, every deed, locked tighter than my new deadbolts. Patel called that morning. "We've drafted a settlement. Proposal," she said. "You'll like it." I did. It required both of them to repay 6,046, issue written apologies, and agree to structured distributions over 10 years, contingent on financial counseling. Any violation, and they'd activate. The $1 clause, clean, sharp, undeniable. Evan blustered first. I listened to him through Patel's speakerphone as he spat words like forgiveness and family, but the same voice that ordered a caterer while I was on life support now sounded desperate. He threatened to go public, to talk to journalists. Patel smiled. Go ahead, she said. Public records tell better stories than tabloids. Then Rao, the accountant, sent me an email at 3:12 p.m. with a single line. Found this buried in Evan's sent folder. It was an email draft to a private buyer. I can offer the lake cabin for around $310K off-market. We can sign after probate clears. The timestamp? February 16th, 11:45 p.m., the night before their celebration. I forwarded it to Patel. No comment needed. She attached it to the case file and sent both siblings a quiet reminder of what evidence looks like when you think no one's watching. By Friday evening, Bree texted me directly. Can we talk alone? We met on my front steps just after dusk. The cold had a bite again, sharp enough to keep the conversation honest. She stood in that influencer coat, eyes glassy, hands shaking as she handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was the spare key, the one I hadn't seen since last summer. I used to call it my inheritance key, she said. Guess I thought it was funny. It's not. I said nothing. Silence makes people tell the truth. She looked down at the concrete. I didn't know Evan was gonna do all that. I thought it was like a family get-together. I didn't know. You'd see the photos. I let her talk, let her unravel the excuses into confessions. Finally, she pulled out a folded sheet, her written apology. It read, in uneven pen, I, Brianna Kellen, regret my actions and recognize that my father was alive, capable, and deserving of respect. My behavior was selfish and wrong. I intend to rebuild trust through conduct, not words. It was dated, signed, and notarized. Mailboxes and more, March 7th. I took it carefully, not with triumph, but with relief. This is a start, I said. She nodded. Evan won't sign anything until you make him. I smiled faintly. He's not the one I'm trying to save. 3 days later, Evan signed, reluctantly, not because he'd found humility, but because Patel had filed a sanctions notice that would make his life hell if he didn't. The settlement entered the court record. He wired the money the next day. Bree followed, adding $200 more for good measure. When Patel called to confirm receipt, she sounded almost cheerful. All tied up, the trust stands, the amendments valid, and the court's order remains sealed. You're untouchable now. Justice, I said quietly. Smells a lot like cedar. Because that weekend I drove to the lake cabin, March 12th. The snow there melted slower. The pines bent heavy under what winter had left behind. I unlocked the door, breathed in the old air, cedar, dust, and Ellen's perfume faintly clinging to a flannel jacket on the hook. I built a fire and let it crackle. No phone, no paperwork, just flame. On the mantel sat a framed photo, Ellen in her yellow slicker, rain-specked smile brighter than the sun. I told her what happened, softly. Told her about the judge, the gavel, Bree's apology. Told her we'd protected what we built. Outside, the lake was still half frozen, reflecting both the cabin light and the stars. I stood there a long time, feeling the chill cut through my coat but not my calm. Justice doesn't always thunder. Sometimes it hums. It hums in the rhythm of a fax machine printing court orders, in a banker's pen scratching paid, in the hush that follows an apology finally meant. I left the cabin locked, alarm set, key clipped to my own ring, where it belonged. Driving home, the dashboard clock blinked 9:47 p.m., the same numbers as Ellen's birthday. I laughed quietly, like she'd planned it that way. Justice isn't revenge. It's ownership of truth, of legacy, of peace. And for the first time since the ICU, I finally had all three. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that tests your nerves at first and then starts to heal them. I sat at the same walnut dining table where my children had once toasted my supposed absence. Afternoon light fell across the grain, catching faint champagne stains I hadn't sanded out yet. I let them stay, a small museum of what I'd survived. On the table in front of me, I placed three things: the 186 florist receipt, the 146 catering bill, and a photo of Evan and Bree at ages 8 and 5, grinning under crooked Halloween capes. Proof of beginnings and endings in equal measure. It was Thursday, March 13th. Patel had emailed to confirm that the settlement order was filed and the no contest clause officially active. Rao texted that the accounts reconciled to the penny. There was nothing left to fix, only to understand. I'd spent my whole life building things I could measure: houses, ledgers, bank statements. I thought structure meant safety, but sitting there, I realized the real mistake wasn't legal, it was emotional. Every time I fixed my kids' messes, I taught them messes had no cost. Every time I said it's fine, I chipped away at the word respect until it was hollow. The oven timer dinged from the kitchen. I'd set it for no reason, maybe habit, maybe memory. I let it ring 5 beats before clicking it off. The sound was the same pitch as the ICU monitor, only calmer now. Less warning, more rhythm. An email arrived from Patel. Just one line: "You chose boundaries over battles, proud of you." I smiled. Boundaries. The word tasted solid, like cedar and coffee. I poured tea into Ellen's favorite mug, the white ceramic one with the hairline crack she'd refused to replace. "Still holds," she used to say. And she was right. The crack stayed, but the cup never leaked. I traced it with my thumb, thinking of the trust binder on my shelf. That too had its cracks, edges bent, signatures slightly smudged, but it held. On the counter sat the forgiveness folder, still mostly empty. I opened it and slid in a single sheet I'd written earlier that morning. Forgiveness is a dukkha I own. Entry is by conduct only. No lawyer could draft that clause better. Outside, wind rattled the new locks, a reminder that everything I loved was protected not by fear, but by choice. Bree's apology sat folded beside the receipts. Evan's payment confirmation glowed unread in my inbox. I didn't delete it. Some records deserve to exist, proof that even the coldest hearts know the cost of crossing a line. As dusk filled the room, I turned off the lights and stood by the window. Across the street, DeLuca's porch light flicked on, a small, steady glow in the dark. I realized I wasn't angry anymore, just awake. The ICU beeping that once felt like countdown now replayed in my head as something else entirely. A pulse, patient and certain. People talk about closure like it's a door that slams. It's not. It's the quiet click of a lock you finally change yourself. And in that silence I breathed, for the first time in weeks, without counting. Spring crept in slow, brushing Chicago streets with puddles and lilacs. The ice melted off my gutters, revealing the year's first green shoots in Ellen's planter box. I stood at the window one morning, coffee in hand, watching a robin hop along the rail. The world looked cleaner, like it had gone through its own cross-examination. Evan moved out of the condo he'd bragged about for months. Rao sent me the notice: new address, Logan Square rental, 1-year lease. 3 days later, a Zelle ping lit my phone. 3023s labeled, half the party plus misc. We're square. No apology, no warmth, just math. Still, I smiled. The ledger. Finally balanced, even if the relationship never would. Bree kept her word. Her new posts turned quieter. No champagne, no rented penthouses, just simple captions. Volunteering Day. Financial literacy workshop. One of them showed her holding a check-marked Donation Kellen Foundation. I didn't comment. Boundaries work best in silence. One afternoon, Mr. DeLuca stopped by with 2 coffees and a bag of screws. "Garage light still flickers," he said, already halfway up the ladder. "We replaced the weather strip and installed a brighter bulb." "Better security," he said, but I knew it wasn't about safety anymore. It was about control, the good kind, the kind you earn back piece by piece. Inside, I'd started rebuilding small things, tightening door hinges, oiling the banister where Bree's dress once snagged at her 12th birthday party. I found myself humming while I worked. It wasn't joy exactly. It was rhythm, the sound of a man back in step with his own life. That night, I sat at the dining table again, the same place where betrayal began. The old invoices stayed in their folders. The binder rested shut on the sideboard. I opened the forgiveness folder instead. Inside, I taped the spare keys Bree had returned, next to her notarized apology. I left space for Evan's envelope. Still, sealed, still waiting. Before bed, I drafted a short letter to the court clerk, on an recorder. "Please withdraw my pending sanctions motion. Justice has been served. The rest is between a father and his choices." I printed it, signed, and mailed it in the morning, not because they deserved mercy, but because I deserved quiet. A week later, I drove up to the lake cabin again. The snow was gone. The air smelled of thawed pine and mud. I replaced the front lock with a digital keypad and hung a small sign by the entryway. It read, "Respect or don't come in. Simple, firm, final." I opened a new guest logbook and wrote the first entry on the first page. April 2nd, 2025. Martin Kellen. The place still stands. The cabin creaked like an old friend exhaling. The lake rippled in silver lines. I poured a small glass of Ellen's favorite bourbon, raised it toward the water, and whispered, "Boundaries kept." The night wind carried back only stillness. That was enough. The calendar flipped to late March, the snow long gone, the city back to its usual noise. One quiet morning, I opened my email and found a message that made me laugh out loud. Subject: line, "Quick offer for your property." It was from a developer, someone Evan must have pitched weeks ago. The email read, "Mr. Kellen, we'd still be interested in purchasing your brick 2 flat for cash. Evan mentioned you might be looking to downsize." There it was, my son's ambition, still echoing even after the gavel. The developer had CC'd Evan by mistake. I stared at the thread for a long second, then hit reply all, and typed just 2 words, "Not for sale." 5 minutes later, a reply pinged back. "Apologies, sir. I actually remember you and your late wife. We built that wheelchair ramp together for the vet on Maple back in '03. Fine work. The neighborhood misses that kind of craftsmanship." I read it twice, smiling. That was my legacy, not the 5 million in spreadsheets, but the ramp, the houses, the things that stayed standing. I forwarded the email to Bree. The subject line, "Legacy is what you build, not what you empty." She replied 10 minutes later with a single red heart emoji. Nothing else. It was the perfect amount. That night I poured a cup of tea and let the house settle around me. The locks clicked softly as the furnace kicked in, a steady heartbeat. Beneath the floorboards, I looked toward the oven, half expecting the timer to ding. Out of habit, I set it anyway. 30 minutes. No reason. Maybe I just liked the sound. I sat in the armchair, eyes closed, listening. Somewhere in the rhythm of that ticking I heard echoes, the ICU monitor, the courtroom gavel, the timer I'd used to remind myself to breathe. All the same pulse, really. Time proving that what doesn't kill you can teach you timing. When the timer rang, I didn't move. I let it chime until it stopped on its own. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was earned. I stood, crossed to the window, and looked out at the street. Across the way, DeLuca's porch light glowed steady. Bree's car wasn't there, and that was fine. The absence didn't sting anymore. It breathed. I thought of Ellen, the way she'd say, "You measure a man by what he holds on to when everyone else lets go." She'd have laughed at all this, the paperwork, the affidavits, the cold precision of justice. But she'd also be proud that I'd learned not to let anger drive the nails. The phone buzzed once more. Patel checking in. "Everything still quiet on your end?" "Quiet enough," I said. "That's rare," she joked. "You planning to celebrate?" I looked around the room, the polished table, the sealed folder labeled forgiveness. "Already did," I said, and hung up. For the first time since February, I slept through the night. No nightmares, no hospital sounds, just the even breathing of a man who'd finished his work. If there's an irony to the whole thing, it's this. The party they threw to divide what I'd earned ended up being the best exhibit I ever brought to court. Their celebration became my proof, their greed my freedom. I turned off the lights, leaving one lamp glowing near the trust binder. As I walked down the hall, I whispered the line that had waited at the back of my throat since the ICU. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away, because I was never their prize to inherit. I was the craftsman who decides when the job is finished." If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're listening at night, set your thermostat the way you like it. No one else gets a vote.